talk about thematic funds on the ET Money Show, and what, according to you, helps you decide whether you should be having a thematic fund in your portfolio or not, or even for diversification. If you are someone who wants to consider thematic fund, this is the discussion that you should be watching, because with me I have Mirae AMC's head product communication and strategy, Mayukh Datta. Mayukh, good evening and welcome to the show.
Thank you, Kavita, for having me on the show.
Thematic funds, okay, this is a very popular kind of category, at least since last 2 years, if I have to really think about, go back, because what's happening is AMCs are regularly coming up with innovations, okay, and thematic is one category where they have really worked a lot. It's gaining momentum, but then it is not for everyone. It is not for all type of investors. What exactly is a thematic fund? How different is it from a sector fund?
Okay, so thematic funds, as it says, is it tries to bring in different businesses which could be interlinked by a central theme. So that's what a thematic fund is. A sector could be one of those interlinking ideas which become a thematic fund. So I would say a sector fund and a thematic fund are separate in that sense. A theme can also evolve with time, but a sector fund will be only specific to one specific sector. So its investment objective will be slightly limited, while a thematic fund's investment objective will be slightly broad. To give quickly an example, a consumption fund versus an FMCG fund. An FMCG is one of the things which you and I would consume, but a consumption fund could be about housing, it could be about financial services, it could be about FMCG, about food and many other things, while an FMCG fund would actually be a specific part of what could be a sector fund, because it only invests into a certain set of businesses, which is a sector therefore.
All right. So now, to include this kind of fund in a portfolio, what should be your criteria? What are those guidelines or those checkpoints which one should consider?
So I would say three things in there. The first thing, prior to considering thematic funds for anyone's portfolio, our view would be to first have your core portfolio correct and built up, which are your mainstream investment objectives and funds which are for that purposes, whether this is a mutual funds or anything else. Get your core portfolio right. Second would be then build upon that as an add-on to that core portfolio. You could consider thematic funds. And the third on that would be to start small and consider the themes which somebody is more accustomed to or would be aware of those themes, and then start building up rest of the portfolios, but not at the cost of your core objectives and core investments.
So how can one identify themes? Because now, first of all, how many themes do we have? And as per that, one needs to decide the risk appetite and then select a theme, or you need to align that particular theme with your goal. How can one club it?
Sure. So I would always say that any investment should be linked to the risk profile of the investor. So if and their investment objective. Typically, if somebody who has a slightly more appetite for a certain amount of risk in their portfolios, and somebody who has a longer investment tenure, could consider thematic funds, because they have a certain objective. They are slightly concentrated than probably the core products, which are more diversified. So therefore, anybody who has an understanding understands the risk of a slightly limited mandate investment, they could consider these funds. And the second question was what they should consider. As I said, they should look at the themes which they are comfortable with. They could also look at themes which are domestic to India, for example, consumption, manufacturing now in India, which are some of the key themes, of financial services, which are long-term themes in India. They could also consider some of the international themes and ideas which are currently not available in India, like investments in tech companies or EV, the whole universe of electric vehicles, artificial intelligence and so on, which are evolving outside of India, but currently those ideas in the Indian space are very limited.
So one cannot have this thematic category as the first fund?
Ideally, not necessarily. Very few investors would have that as their first funds, but they would be quite evolved, or they would have understood that theme much more. But for majority of your viewers, I would say is to look at thematic funds after they have built their core and foundation portfolio.
So what happens is, when you talk about core portfolio, you're already well diversified, okay, in your core portfolio, because you're lining it up with your goals.
Yes.
Now, to have a thematic fund, won't that be a repetition of investment in your portfolio? How should one segregate that?
Usually when you look at core portfolios, the mainstream funds, they are basically diversified funds, but they are clubbed together by size. So
Right.
it's basically market cap over the businesses. So you have, if you have the large companies, then you have large all companies put together, and then within that you get different sectors, which is an outcome. If you take at the top 100 companies, then they may be petroleum companies, they could be banking companies or whatever, but that's not under your control because you have clubbed them by size. They are your diversified funds and they are your core portfolios. For thematics, you are basically looking at different businesses. So you're taking businesses put together, and then the size could be an outcome. So therefore they are slightly different in behavior than your normal funds. So one way of looking at it is market cap over business is your core portfolio, business over market cap is your thematic products. Naturally, when you take similar linking businesses together, they would come with certain amount of risk because when they go up together. When they are not doing well, they may not be doing well together. Therefore, your exposure needs to be slightly limited and with a long time tenure in mind.
So a sector fund and a thematic fund would be a clash in the portfolio, or it's fine?
It would be slightly clash, and sector would be slightly limited in its mandate. So I would say a thematic, if you have to go for that, go for a theme which will keep on evolving so that you do not have to keep on adding or getting in or out of sector funds. So as the themes evolve, new sectors may come into a thematic fund, may also go out. While in a sector fund, you need to take the call that this was the right time to enter and also the right time to exit from that funds because they have a limited mandate. A thematic funds mandate will keep on changing with time. It will be evolving. So you can take a longer tenure investment in that.
So what will be the role of a fund manager in a thematic fund? You know you've got to cater to a particular sector and companies and business related to that sector. So how does a fund manager operate here?
So a fund manager would look at that, what is the current status of the theme. Let's give an example to answer that. If you were to look at a consumption thematic product today, 20 years back it was just basic consumption, which was food, your housing, your shelter, what we used to call as roti kapda makan, basic requirements. Today it has turned into financial services along with the main things. Your travel is a part of your consumption, your financial services and whatever we are consuming, our telecom is a part of our consumption, internet is a part of our consumption. So had it only been a banking fund or a consumption idea, here the consumption as it evolves, the consumption fund is able to pick up what is this. So the fund manager is also able to recognize the trends and therefore being able to invest into these ideas as the whole profile changes.
So how can one diversify internationally in thematic funds?
So they currently through the international funds available in India, investors can look at such themes which are technically not available in India. So there are some international mutual funds available. There are some which have restrictions, but there are some other ideas which are still available where investors could look at some of the themes which are global in nature and invest through them through mutual funds. Of course, they should always keep the risk in mind, and also the ideas which they are investing in, they should be suitable to their investment horizon and risk profile.
So one needs to be invested for a long-term period in a thematic fund. Is that what you're suggesting?
I would suggest that, yes, you are right.
And what if the theme, because the performance of a theme-based fund can also change, depends on the market condition and other reforms. What the fund is all about, it depends on that. One needs to keep a track of that to be in that fund?
Absolutely. I think it is always imperative that an investor looks at themes from a long period of time and also understand that all themes, like every businesses, go through cycles. So if those business cycles are of a long tenure, so over a period of time those risks actually play down because you have the power of compounding and time invested helping for you. So I would suggest that anybody considering thematic funds should consider them for a long period of time so that the risk play down over a period of time, your entry exit is not an issue, and overall it fits into your risk profile.
Talking about entry and exit, the process of investing in a thematic fund is the same as you do in regular other funds?
Absolutely. You could do it as a lump sum investment, you could do it through an SIP or an STP, whichever is convenient to the investor. So they have the same rules and regulations as any normal mutual fund would have.
So is it also a very high risk fund for which you need to have a high risk appetite?
Usually they tend to have a slightly more risk profile, but if investors were to stay invested and invest with small amounts over a period of time, that risk can be managed. But yes, they should be cognizant that there is a certain risk attached to thematic funds, which is not as much as the normal diversified fund.
All right, so when we talk about diversification, there are various aspects to it, okay? But then if at all you think that thematic fund is one, you need to diversify in your portfolio. One needs to check the risk appetite and also make sure that you try and align this particular fund to your goal. Thank you so much for being on the show, and that will be all on the Money Show today.
Thank you, Kavita.